A Search in Secret India, Chapter 11. The Wonder-Worker of Benaras. My wanderings in Bengal must hasten into the limbo of unrecorded experience, and my unexpected contacts near Bodh Gaya with 3 Tibetan lamas who proffer an invitation to their mountain monastery must likewise follow suit, for I am eager to enter the sacred city of Benares. The train thunders across the great iron bridge near the city, its noise heralding, no doubt, modernity's further invasion of an antiquated and static form of society. The holy Ganges can hardly remain holy much longer when alien and infidel men send snorting fire chariots across its greyish-green waters. So, this is Benares. A huge crowd of pilgrims jostle each other while I pass out of the station and step into a waiting carriage. As we drive along the dusty road, I become aware of a new element in the atmosphere. I try to ignore it, but with increasing insistence it forces itself upon my attention. So, this is India's holiest city? Well, it possesses a most unholy smell. Benares is reputed to be the oldest populated town in India. Its odor fully confirms its reputation. The unsavory air seems unsupportable. I begin to lose courage. Shall I order the driver to take me back to the station? Is it not better to be an arrant infidel and breathe clean air than acquire piety at such a monstrous price? And then I reflect that time will somehow acclimatize one even to this air, as it acclimatizes one to more unfamiliar things still in this stale land. But Banaras? You may be the hub of Hindu culture, yet please learn something from the infidel whites and temper your holiness with a little hygiene. I learned that the stench arises partly because the roads are paved with a mixture of cow dung and earth, and partly because the old moat which surrounds the city has been used by the people of many generations as a convenient refuse heap. If Indian chronicles can be credited, Benares was an established city as long as 1200 years before the Christian era. Just as pious Englishmen journey to the holy city of Canterbury in the Middle Ages, so have Indians flocked from every part of their country to the holy city of Benares. Hindus come in their wealthy state or poverty-stricken condition to receive its blessing, while the ailing come to eke out their last days, for death here will take the soul straight into paradise. The next day, I wander afoot through old Kashi, as the Hindus prefer to call their city, and explore the labyrinth of crooked streets which compose it. There is a purpose behind my aimless wandering, for I bear in my pocket a paper which describes the location of the house of a yogi wonder-worker, whose disciple I met in Bombay. I pass through stuffy streets along which a carriage would be too wide to pass. I make my way through crowded bazaars where see the people of a dozen different races, and where mangy dogs and innumerable flies add to the bustle. Old women with grey hair and shrunken breasts, young women with supple figures and smooth brown limbs, pilgrims fingering their rosaries and muttering the same sacred words which they have already repeated perhaps 50,000 times, the gaunt figures of ash-besmeared elderly ascetics, all these and other types throng the narrow ways. Among a tangle of streets which are full of turmoil, noise and colour, I come accidentally upon the Golden Temple, which is famed among the orthodox throughout India. Ash-bedabbled ascetics, whose uncouth appearance is repellent to Western eyes, crouch around the entrance. Worshippers flow in and out in an endless stream. Several carry lovely flower garlands and thus give a gay colour to the scene. The pious touch the stone doorposts with their foreheads as they leave the temple, and then, turning, start in momentary surprise on beholding the white infidel. I become conscious again of the invisible barrier between these men and myself, the profound barrier between white and brown skin. Two domes, made of thick sheets of gold, glisten in the quivering sunlight. Screeching parrots swarm on the nearest tower. The golden temple is given over to God Shiva. Where is he now? I wonder, this God to whom these Hindus cry, before whom they pray, and to whose stone representations I have seen them offer scented flowers and cooked rice? I move on and stand near the threshold of another temple, where I watch the god Krishna being worshipped. Lighted camphor burns before a golden idol. The temple bells peal out their insistent calls for his attention, and the sounds of conch horns stray up to his unhearing ears. A lean and austere priest comes out and looks questioningly at me, and I proceed upon my way. Who can count the multitude of images and idols which teem within the temples and houses of Benares? Who can explain these serious-looking Hindus, so often childish, yet sometimes so profoundly philosophical? Through the dark alleys I thread my way afoot and alone, seeking the house of the Wonder-Worker. At length I emerge from the swarming streets into wider roads. A straggling, ragged column of little boys, thin youths, and a few men swing past me in a single file. Their leader carries a makeshift banner with something indecipherable inscribed upon the flag. They shout queer catchwords and occasional snatches of song. They look at me with hostile faces and scowling eyes as they go by, so that I sense the political nature of this motley procession. Last night, in a packed bazaar, with no European or policeman anywhere in sight, someone behind me hisses out a threat to shoot me. At once, I wheel around, only to behold a crowd of bland faces. For the young fanatic had disappeared around a corner into the darkness. And so I gaze with pity upon this ragged procession, which now disappears down the road. Politics, that deceptive siren who promises everybody everything, has gathered a few more victims into her insidious arms. I come at last to a street where the houses are large and well built, and where the compounds are spacious and trimly kept. I quicken my pace until I reach a gate, upon whose post the name Vishuddhananda is inscribed on a stone tablet. I enter the compound, for this is the house which I seek, and approach someone who lounges on the veranda. He is a young man, with an unintelligent face. I ask him in Hindustani, "Where is the teacher?" But he shakes his head and gives me to understand that no such person is known here. I utter the teacher's name, but again receive a negative reply. The result is disappointing, but I am determined not to be beaten. An inward monitor warns me that the young man thinks no European can possibly have any business here, and that he has jumped to the conclusion I am really seeking some other house. I look again at his face and write him down as stupid. Ignoring his gesticulations, I walk straight into the house. In an inner room, I come upon a semicircle of dark faces. A group of well-dressed Indians squat around the floor. A bearded old man reclines upon a couch at the far end of the room. His venerable appearance and seat of honor are enough to inform me that here is the object of my quest. I raise my hands in salutation, palms touching. "Peace, master." I make the conventional Hindustani greeting. I proffer my introduction and present myself as a writer traveling in India, yet withal a student of their native philosophy and mysticism. I make it clear that the disciple whom I encountered was careful to explain that his teacher never made a public exhibition of his wonderful powers, and that even under the shadow of privacy, he rarely displayed them to strangers. Nevertheless, in view of my deep interest in the ancient wisdom, I craved their indulgence and begged to be treated as an exception. The students stared blankly at each other and then turned towards the teacher, as if in wonderment at his response. Vishuddhananda is a man of more than 70 years of age, I judge. A short nose and a long beard adorn his face. I am struck by the large size of his eyes, which are deeply pouched. The sacred thread of a Brahmin hangs around his neck. The old man fixes his eyes coldly upon me, as though I were a specimen to be studied under a microscope. I feel something weird and uncanny touch my heart. Indeed, some strange force seems to pervade the whole room, and I feel slightly uneasy. At length he addresses some words in a dialect which I recognize as Bengali to a disciple, who turns and informs me that no audience can be granted unless I bring Pandit Kaviraj, who is principal of the government Sanskrit college, to act as interpreter. The Pandit's perfect knowledge of English, combined with his long standing as a disciple of Vishuddhananda, perfectly fits him to act as a medium between us. Come with him tomorrow afternoon, says the teacher. I shall expect you at the hour of 4. I am forced to retreat. On the road, I hail a passing carriage and drive through the winding streets to the Sanskrit college. The principal is not there. Someone thinks he may be at home, so I drive on for another half hour until I find him at last in a tall, ancient house with a projecting upper story whose appearance is strangely like that of a medieval Italian building. The Pandit sits on the floor of a top room, surrounded on every side by small hills of books, papers, and scholastic paraphernalia. He has the Brahmin's typical high brow, thin long nose, and lighter complexion. His face is refined and scholarly. I explain my errand. There is slight hesitation on his part, and then he agrees to accompany me next day. The appointment fixed, I withdraw. I ride down to the Ganges and dismiss the carriage. I saunter along the river bank, which, for the benefit of bathing pilgrims, is built into long rows of stone steps. The feet of many centuries have worn down the steps until they are rugged and uneven. How untidy and irregular is the waterfront of Banaras! Temples tumble into the water. Glistening domes are neighbors to squat, square, decorated palaces, which rise to varying heights, while the whole hodgepodge of buildings mingles the ancient and the modern indiscriminately. Priests and pilgrims swarm everywhere. I come across some pandits teaching their pupils in small open rooms. The walls are plainly whitewashed. The teachers sit on rugs and the pupils squat respectfully around, absorbing the cobwebbed doctrines of their creed. A bearded ascetic's appearance causes me to make inquiries. He has rolled over and over in the dust for 400 miles. A strange way to make one's pilgrimage to Benares. Further on, I meet another weird-looking individual. He has held one arm aloft for years. The sinews and ligaments of his unfortunate limb have almost withered, while the flesh which covers it has shriveled to parchment. How account for such futile austerities? Unless indeed the unending tropical sun has made the minds of these men a trifle mad? It may be that existence is a temperature of 120 degrees in the shade has helped to unbalance these unfortunate members of a race which is already so prone to religious hysteria. The next day, precisely at 4 o'clock, Pandit Kaviraj and I drive into the courtyard of the teacher's house. We enter the large room and greet him. About 6 other disciples are present. Vishuddhananda asks me to come a little closer, so I squat down a few feet away from his couch. "Do you desire to see one of my wonders?" is his first question. "If the master wishes to grant this favor, I shall be extremely pleased." "Give me your handkerchief then. If you have a silk one, so much the better," translates the Pandit. "Any scent which you desire will be created for you with nothing but a lens and the sun's rays as equipment." Fortunately, I do carry a silk handkerchief and pass it to the Wonder-Worker. He takes out a small burning lens and then explains that he wishes to concentrate the sun's rays, but owing to the orb's present position and the sheltered aspect of the room, that cannot be done with directness. The difficulty will easily be overcome, however, by sending one of the disciples outside into the courtyard. The man will use a hand mirror, catch the rays, and then reflect them through an open window into the room. "I shall now create a scent for you out of the air," announces Vishuddhananda. "Which would you like?" "Can you produce white jasmine?" He takes up my handkerchief in his left hand and holds the burning lens above it. For the brief space of 2 seconds, a gleaming ray of sunlight hovers upon the silken fabric. Then he puts down the lens and hands back the handkerchief. I put it to my nose and am rewarded with the delightful fragrance of white jasmine. I examine the handkerchief, but can discover no trace of moisture, no evidence that some liquid perfume has been dropped on it. I am puzzled and half suspiciously look at the old man. He offers to repeat the demonstration. The second time I choose attar of roses. I watch him narrowly during the further experiment. Every move which he makes, every bit of space around him is scrutinized with all care I can muster. I examine his puffy hands and his spotless white robe with critical eyes, but can detect nothing suspicious. He repeats his former procedure and evokes the perfume of attar of roses, which strongly impregnates another corner of the handkerchief. My third choice is violets. Here again he is equally successful. Vishuddhananda is quite emotionless about his triumph. He treats the whole demonstration as a sort of everyday affair, as a mere minor event. His grave face never once relaxes. "And now I shall choose the scent," he unexpectedly declares. "I shall create the perfume of a flower which grows only in Tibet." He concentrates some sunlight upon the last, unscented corner of the handkerchief, and lo, it is done. He has evoked a fourth perfume which I fail to recognize. Slightly bewildered, I put the piece of white silk into my pocket. The fate appears to border on the miraculous. Has he concealed the perfumes upon his person? Has he hidden them in his robe? Then he would need to carry a formidable stock, because until I spoke he could not know which scent I should choose. His simple robe could hardly contain such an ample stock as would be requisite. Besides, not once has his hand disappeared into the folds of his robe. I ask for permission to inspect the lens. The latter proves to be quite an ordinary magnifying glass, set in a wire frame with small wire handle. I can see nothing suspicious about it. There is an additional safeguard for what it is worth, in the fact that Vishuddhananda is being watched, not only by me, but also by the half-dozen disciples around me. The Pandit has already informed me that, without a single exception, they are all men of high standing, good education, and responsibility. Hypnotism offers a possible explanation. The value of this explanation can be simply tested. When I return to my quarters, I shall show the handkerchief to other persons. Vishuddhananda has another and greater piece of wonder-working to show me. It is one he seldom performs. He tells me that he needs strong sunlight for this second feat. Now the sun is sinking and evening is approaching. So I am to come again at high noon of a later day of the week. He will then display his amazing feat of temporarily restoring life to the dead. I leave him and drive home, where I show the handkerchief to 3 persons. Each one finds that it still bears strong traces of the perfumes. The feat, therefore, cannot be accounted for on the hypothesis of hypnotism. Nor is it much easier to regard the whole affair as a piece of trickery. Once again, I am in the house of the magician. The latter tells me that he can restore life only to a small animal. Usually, he experiments with a bird. A sparrow is strangled and left exposed to our gaze for about an hour, so that we can assure ourselves that it is really dead. Its eyes are motionless, its body is sad and stiff. I cannot discover a single sign which might betray the presence of life in the little creature. The magician picks up his magnifying glass and concentrates a ray of sunlight into an eye of the bird. I wait while a few minutes pass uneventfully. The old man sits bent over his strange task, his large eyes fixed in a glassy stare, his face cold, emotionless, and non-committal. Suddenly, his lips open and his voice breaks out into a weird, crooning chant in some language which is unknown to me. A little later, the bird's body begins to twitch. I have seen a dog twitch its suffering frame in the same manner when the spasms of approaching death have overtaken it. Then comes a slight fluttering of the feathers, and within a few minutes the sparrow is on its legs, hopping around the floor. Truly, the dead have come to life. During its next phase of this strange existence, the bird gathers sufficient strength to fly up into the air, where it busies itself for a while in finding new perching points as it flies around the room. The thing seems so incredible that I pull body and wits together in an effort to reassure myself that everything and everyone around me is real, tangible, and not hallucinatory. A tense half-hour passes while I watch the fluttering efforts of the revived creature. At last, a sudden climax provides me with a fresh surprise. The poor sparrow falls through the air and lies motionless at our feet. It remains there without stirring. An examination reveals it as breathless and quite dead. "How could you have prolonged its life still further?" I asked the magician. "That is the most I can show you at present," he replies with a slight shrug. The pundit whispers that greater things are hoped for from future experiments. There are other things his master can do, though I must not overuse his indulgence and make him play the part of a street showman. What I have seen already must satisfy me. I feel once again the pervading sense of mystery which fills the place. The stories of Vishuddhananda's other powers only heighten this feeling. I learn that he can bring fresh grapes seemingly out of air and deliver sweetmeats out of sheer nothingness. That if he takes a faded flower in his hand, it will soon regain its pristine freshness. What is the secret of these apparent miracles? I try to elicit some hint and receive an extraordinary reply. It is one of those explanations which do not really explain. The real secret still remains hidden behind the square forehead of the Benares wonder-worker, and he has so far not revealed it even to his closest disciple. He tells me that his birthplace was in Bengal. At the age of 13, he was bitten by a poisonous animal. His condition became so serious that his mother despaired of his life and took him down to the Ganges to die. According to the Hindu religion, there can be no holier or happier death than beside this river. He was carried into the sacred stream while the mourning family gathered on the banks for the funeral ceremonies. He was lowered into the water, and then a miracle happened. The deeper they dipped him, the more the water sank around his body. When he was raised again, the body rose upward in harmony until it reached its normal level. Again and again he was dipped. Again and again the waters sank of their own accord. In short, the Ganges refused to receive the boy as its dying guest. A yogi sat on the banks of the river and watched the proceedings. He got up and predicted that the boy was reserved to lie and achieve greatness, and that his destiny was more fortunate inasmuch as he would become a famous yogi. The man then rubbed some herbs on the poisoned water on the wound and went away. 7 days later he returned and told the parents that the boy was now quite cured, and indeed it was so. But during the interim, a strange thing had happened to the child. His entire mentality and character had changed, and instead of being content to remain at home with his parents, he thirsted to become a wandering yogi. Henceforth, he worried his mother constantly until a few years later she granted him permission to leave home. He went forth in quest of the yoga adepts. He made his way to Tibet, that trans-Himalayan land of mystery, in the hope of finding his destined teacher among its reputed miracle-working hermits. For it is an idea strongly inherent in the Indian mind that the aspirant must become a personal disciple of someone who has himself mastered the mysteries of yoga, if he is to succeed in the same quest. The young Bengali sought for such a man among the solitary hermits who dwell in huts or caves, sometimes when the mountains were swept by howling, icy blizzards, but he returned home disappointed. Years passed uneventfully, yet his desire found no abatement. Once more he crossed the border and wandered the bleak wastes of southern Tibet. In a simple habitation among the mountain fastnesses, he discovered a man who proved to be the long-sought teacher. I hear next one of those incredible statements that might once have moved me to satiric laughter, but now actually startles me. For I am solemnly assured that his Tibetan master is no less than 1,200 years old. The assertion is made as calmly as a prosaic Westerner might mention that he is 40. This amazing legend of longevity has cropped up at least twice before Brahma, the yogi of the Adyar river, once told me that his master in Nepal was over 400 years old, while a holy man whom I encountered in Western India said that there was a yogi living in an almost inaccessible mountain cave on the Himalayas who was so old, over 1,000 years, was the figure given me, that his lids of his eyes actually drooped heavily with age. I had dismissed both these assertions as being too fantastic, but now I must again entertain a repetition of them, for this man before me hints at being on the track of the elixir of life. The Tibetan teacher initiated young Vishuddhananda into the principles and practices of the yoga of body control. Under this rigorous training, the disciple developed powers of body and mind which were supernormal. He was also initiated into a strange art which he calls solar science. For 12 years, despite the hardships of life in a snow-bound region, he continued his pupillage at the feet of the Tibetan possessor of immortal life. His training finished, he was sent back to India. He crossed the mountain passes, descended into the plains, and in due course himself became a teacher of yoga. He settled for a while at Puri, on the Bay of Bengal, where he still maintains a large bungalow. The flock of disciples which gathered around him belong exclusively to the higher class of Hindus. They comprise wealthy merchants, rich landowners, government officials, and even a Raja. I get the impression, perhaps I am wrong, that humbler folk are not encouraged. How did you perform those wonders you showed me? I asked bluntly. Vishuddhananda crosses his plump hands. What have you been shown is not the result of yoga practice. It is the result of a knowledge of solar science. The essence of yoga is the development of willpower and mental concentration on the part of the yogi. But in solar science, practice those qualities are not required. Solar science is merely a collection of secrets and no special training is necessary to make use of them. It can be studied in exactly the same way that any of your Western material sciences are studied. Pandit Kaviraj supplements the hint that this strange art is more akin to the science of electricity and magnetism than to any other. I feel as much in the dark as before, so the master vouchsafes some further information. This solar science which now comes from Tibet is nothing new. It was well known to the great yogis of India in very ancient times. But now, except for a rare few, it has almost been lost to this country. There are life-saving elements in the sun's rays, and if you know the secret of separating or selecting those elements, you too could do wonders. And there are etheric forces in sunlight which have a magic power once you get control of them. Are you teaching these solar science secrets to your disciples? Not yet, but I am preparing to do so. Certain disciples will be selected and the secrets imparted to them. Even now we are building a large laboratory where study classes, demonstrations and experiments will be carried on. Then what are your disciples learning at present? They are being initiated into yoga. The Pandit takes me to inspect the laboratory. It is a modern structure several stories high and distinctly European in design. The walls are built of red brick and large gaps take the place of windows. These gaps await the coming of huge sheets of plate glass, for the research work to be conducted in the laboratory will involve the reflection of sunlight through red, blue, green, yellow and colorless glass. The Pandit tells me that no Indian works can make glass of the size required to form the giant windows and therefore the edifice cannot be completed. He asks me to make inquiries in England but emphasizes that Vishuddhananda wants his specifications to be adhered to completely. These include the condition that the makers should guarantee their glass to be absolutely free from air bubbles and that the colored glass should be quite transparent. Each sheet is to measure 12 feet in length, 8 feet in width and 1 inch in thickness. The laboratory building is surrounded by spacious gardens, which are girdled and screened from prying eyes by rows of feather-branched palm trees. I return to the Wonder-Worker and sit down before him. The disciples have thinned out. Only 2 or 3 are left. Pandit Kaviraj squats beside me, his study-worn face fixed in devoted regard of his master. Vishuddhananda momentarily glances at me and then studies the floor. Dignity and reserve mingle in his manner. His face is preternaturally solemn and the faces of his disciples reflect his solemnity. I attempt to penetrate behind his mask of gravity, but can perceive nothing. The mind of this man is as impenetrable to my Western mentality as is the inmost shrine of the Golden Temple in yonder town. He is steeped in the strange lore of Oriental magic. I feel strongly that though he has shown me his wonders even before I express a second request, nevertheless, he has put up a psychic barrier between us which I shall never cross. My welcome is but a surface one. Western investigators and Western disciples are not wanted here. He drops an unexpected remark quite suddenly. I could not initiate you as my own pupil unless I secure permission beforehand from my Tibetan master. This is a condition under which I have to work. Has he read the thoughts which run through my brain? I gaze at him, His slightly bulging forehead betrays a faint pucker. Anyway, I have expressed no desire to become his disciple. I am in no undue hurry to become anyone's disciple. But of one thing I feel sure. Such a request would bring forth a negative answer. But how can you communicate with your master if he is in far-off Tibet? I query. We are in perfect touch upon the inner planes, he replies. I am conscious of learning but not of comprehending. Yet his unexpected remark has turned my mind away from his miracles for a while. I fall into a pensive mood. Unwittingly, I find myself asking, Master, how can one find enlightenment? Vishuddhananda does not reply. Instead, he puts me another question. Unless you practice yoga, how can you obtain enlightenment? I think the matter over for a few seconds. Yet I am told that without a teacher is it extremely difficult to understand yoga, let alone practice it successfully. Genuine teachers are hard to find. His face remains indifferent and imperturbable. When the seeker is ready, the master always appears. I express my doubts. He spreads out a plump hand. A man must first make himself ready, then, no matter where he is, he will eventually find a teacher. And if the master does not come in the flesh, he will appear to you in the inward eye of the seeker. How shall one begin then? Mark off a part of your time every day to sit in the simple posture which I shall show you. That will help to prepare you. Take care also to curb anger and control passion. Vishuddhananda proceeds to show me the lotus posture with which I am already familiar. Why he calls this a simple posture, with its entwined and folded legs, I cannot understand. What adult European can achieve such a contortion? I exclaim. The difficulty lies only in the early attempts. It becomes easy if practiced every morning and evening. The important thing is to fix an exact time of the day for this yoga practice and to keep regularly to that time. At first, 5 minutes effort is required. After 1 month, you can lengthen the time to 10 minutes. After 3 months, to 20 minutes, and so on. Take care to keep the spine straight. This exercise will enable a man to acquire physical poise and mental calmness. Calmness is necessary for the further practice of yoga. Then you teach the yoga of body control? Yes. Do not imagine that the yoga of mind control is superior to it. Just as every human being both thinks and acts, so there must be training for both sides of our nature. The body acts on the mind and the mind interacts on the body, and they cannot be separated in practical development. I become aware once again of an inner reluctance on the part of this man to submit to further questioning. A mental coldness fills the atmosphere. I decide to withdraw soon, but fling a last question at him. Have you discovered whether there is any goal, any purpose in life? The disciples break their gravity and smile at my simplicity. Only an infidel, ignorant Westerner could ask such a question. Do not all the sacred Hindu books, without exception, indicate that God holds this world in his hand for his own purpose? The teacher does not answer me. He relapses into silence but glances at Kaviraj, who thereupon supplies the answer. Certainly, there is a purpose. We have to attain spiritual perfection to unite with God. And then, for the next hour, the room remains silent. Vishuddhananda fingers the large pages of a thick book, whose paper cover is printed in Bengali. The disciples stare, sleep, or meditate. A soothing, mesmeric influence begins to steal over me. I feel that if I stay long enough, I shall either fall asleep or fall into some kind of a trance. So I pull my faculties together, thank the teacher, and take my departure. I have mused for long over the mystery of the wonder-worker, who plays tricks with the ether and restores fleeting life to dead birds. His plausible but brief exposition of solar science does not capture me. Only a thoughtless man would deny that modern science has not fully explored the possibilities latent in the sun's light. But there are features in this case which incline me to look elsewhere for an explanation. For in Western India, I had learnt of the existence of two yogis who could perform one of Vishuddhananda's feats, namely the extraction of different scents from the air. Unfortunately for my investigation, both these persons died towards the close of last century, but the source of my information seemed reliable enough. In both cases, a fragrant oily essence was made to appear on the palm of the yogi's hand, as though it exuded through the skin. Sometimes the perfume was strong enough to scent the room. Now, if Vishuddhananda possesses the same strange gift, he can easily transfer some scent from his palm to the handkerchief, whilst appearing to fumble with the magnifying glass. In short, the whole performance of concentrating the sunlight may be nothing more than a piece of play acting to cover the transference of the magically produced scent. Another point which favors this view is the fact that the wonder-worker has failed to reveal the secret to a single one of his disciples so far. Their hopes have been kept up, meanwhile, by the protracted building of costly laboratories. Even this work has come to a standstill because of the impossibility of procuring the giant sheets of glass in India, and so they wait on and hope. What process has Vishuddhananda really used? If the concentration of sunlight is merely a blind, it may be that the production of fragrant odors is another of the yoga powers which can be developed by personal effort, but I do not know. Nevertheless, though I cannot provide a tenable theory to account for the wonder-worker's feats, I need not jump at the theory of solar science which he offers. Why trouble my head further? My duty is but to play the scribe and record these happenings, not to explain the inexplicable. Here is a side of Indian life which must remain sealed. For even if the plump little wonder-worker, or some chosen disciple, demonstrates this strange art to the outside world and engages the astounded attention of scientists, it is unlikely that a secret will be made known. I think I have read so far into his character, at least. An inner voice asks me, how has he revived the dead bird, and what about this legend of perfected yogi's ability to extend indefinitely the duration of his life? Have some Eastern men really discovered the secret of protracted age? I turn my head away from the inner questioner and wearily look up at the heavens. The imponderable immensity of the star-filled sky awes me. Nowhere are the stars so bright as in the tropical sky. I continue to gaze fixedly at the twinkling points of light. When I look around again at my fellow creatures and at the amorphous mass of houses, I begin to feel deeply the recondite mystery of this world. Tangible things and ordinary objects recede quickly into the unreality, and the blend of shadowy, moving figures, slowly gliding boats, and a few bright lamps turn both night and environment into some enchanted land of the dream world. The old Indian philosophical doctrine that the universe is but phantom-like in its real nature drifts into my mind and begins to abet this destruction of my sense of reality. I become ready for the strangest experiences that this planet, which hurries so swiftly through the abysses of space, can bring me. But some creature of the earth world breaks rudely into my heavenly dream by giving loud voice to the monotonous rhythm of an Indian song, and I return rapidly to that potpourri of uncertain pleasures and unexpected sorrows which men call life. End Chapter 11.